started.
Great, thank you. Wow, that was amazing. I don't know who that was, but thank you for the introduction. My name is Ted Davis. I'm the SWAN Board President. It is March 4th, and this is our Directors Quarterly Meeting. Per Illinois Public Act 101-0640, this meeting is being held by remote attendance. I will call the meeting to order at 10:02. Again, welcome to all of you. We're up to about 62, which is great. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay, moving on then. We'd like to allow any of you who are new directors or first-time visitors to Quarterly to unmute and introduce yourself and say hello. Do we have any first-timers? We've got several new directors. None of them on the call yet. No first-time visitors?
They're just shy.
They must be. Chicago Heights, River Forest, Oak Lawn, any of you out there? I know you're all new. All right, I'm not going to make anybody talk if they don't want to. Moving on then, the next item is an action item. It is the approval of the December 5th, 2020 quarterly meeting minutes. Can I have a motion to approve those, please?
So moved.
And that was?
Ben Weslow.
Thank you, Ben. And a second? Any
second,
of the 60?
It's Julie.
Thank you, Julie. That was Julie Millivick from Downers Grove. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Okay, is there anyone who does not approve the minutes at this time? There being no objections to the approval, we'll consider them approved. The next item is a discussion item for the SWAN fiscal 22 budget. Aaron, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the SWAN quarterly meeting for March 4th and 2021. Appreciate seeing you all online. And I believe many of you have already participated in a committee of the whole meeting that took place February 9th, where I did an overview of the budget. I think we set maybe the SWAN land speed record for a membership meeting. It was basically done in 30 minutes. There were really no budget questions. Therefore, based on that, I've really curtailed what would be a long budget presentation for today, but I'm always happy to answer any questions that you have. So Dawn, if you can just move to the next slide. So in terms of where we are with this process, we are now at the approval stage. So just to recap, this budget was created with board input, and then documents were posted for the committee of the whole meeting, and then we did the committee of the whole meeting. I did get a few questions from some directors in the narrative. I've answered those questions from some of those directors, and I will make sure to update the budget narrative, assuming we're going to have this budget approved, but I will make sure to update that to make sure it's clear for everyone later. There's just a couple lines that I think in the narrative that were maybe a little confusing to some. Dawn, if you can move to the next slide. So just hitting the highlights here. So this is a budget that is showing the membership at 100 total libraries. As we have outlined for the SWAN membership as a recommendation that was basically coming out of our strategic planning process, is that SWAN is open for membership, but we're doing this on a every other year schedule. So the add-ons that would normally be maybe part of the budget that you saw for last year are not in the FY22 budget. That said, I'm happy to have conversations with libraries that are interested in joining SWAN. And in fact, I do have a few libraries that have reached out to me in the past, and I will be spending some of this FY22 year in discussion with those so that I can have that ready for next year's budget. So what we do have in this budget, it's showing that, we have had 5 years of growth with 25 libraries joining SWAN. So some of our budget is also just reflecting the fact that we have growth in revenue and also increases in various areas of our expenses. But overall, libraries that are joining SWAN on the balance are bringing in more revenue than our expenses are growing to support those libraries. So I think that is something that is worth pointing out. This budget is also really making sure that we are going to be fully in an infrastructure as a service. So you've probably heard about moving to the cloud. SWAN has done a lot of work over the last 5-7 years as far as virtualizing a lot of its infrastructure. And this is the year, the fiscal budget that is presented here, where we will be fully independent. From that, I mean, there won't be any servers that are in the Rails data center or services running from the Rails data center. As it stands right now, we have a few things that Rails has helped us with in terms of implementing, such as their support site or help desk system. And we do have equipment there also for phone notification. All that is in the works of transitioning to our infrastructure or a new service. So one of the things, for example, that this budget has is that our phone notification will be a contracted service with unique management, and the budget lines reflect that. On the revenue side of this budget, we are seeing lower interest income. And then also, as we shared at the December meeting in a conversation we had from Rail at our invitation to have Rails talk about the LSAP funding to SWAN, that was our funding was reduced in this year. So there's no getting around it. When the revenue goes down on that side, it is going to impact membership fees. So you will see that to some degree. That said, the expenses overall, I think we worked really, really hard to reflect, make sure this budget reflects the fact that where we don't need expenses, we've reduced them. So it does reflect the pandemic. In other words, we're not looking at hosting the SWAN Expo, really reduced travel. But this does include some new projects that we're continuing to work on and move forward, and you're going to be hearing about those, at least the Aspen Discovery project today. So this does include an Aspen Discovery annual maintenance of 1 year, and that does come out of our reserves, the 1 year. So what this means, at least in this budget, is that we will continue to run Enterprise, but we will also run Aspen simultaneously. And we're going to be detailing more again later in this meeting. But the idea is that if we find that Aspen is become the catalog that we want it to be, we can gradually move over to Aspen over the course of this next year. And then it would be next year's budget that we'd be looking at. Do we end the subscription to Enterprise? And then we would just move the Aspen annual contract over to just the operating expenses, and we wouldn't be taking that out of reserve. So it's just this one time that we're going to do that. This budget also has reserves used for some book club kits, but we've also added in an expense for KitKeeper. And KitKeeper is a very interesting service that came about from our book club user group. So the book club user group identified a need for maybe doing more organization around shared book clubs, book club kits specifically. So we'll be talking more and more about that with you all as we work more with the KitKeeper product. But just so you know, KitKeeper is really just a staff-only tool. We're not intending it for the public to be using. So as I've noted, we've reduced expenses due to the pandemic, and that even goes as far as reduced utilities and such where we can. And just one small thing worth noting is, if we are having to have insurance covering equipment in the Rails data center, I've also made sure to reflect that the insurance costs are reduced or eliminated where I could. And here are the reserves. So the reserves that we have for the organization in our current budget, FY21, you're seeing that we're roughly around 2 million in reserve, with some reserves being allocated for some one-time expenses. For those of you that may have seen the consortia budget in the past, there were some large expenses in anticipation of various projects, such as a migration. I do have the cost that we had for future ILS migration, if that needs be, and that was based on the 2015 migration that we had done. So that's the 465,000. But the policy that we have is to maintain 4 months operating in reserve. 4 months of our operating reserve is noted there, and then the balance is noted on the final total. So really what we're looking at is we do have healthy reserves. It's something that I think board and I can certainly continue to look at if we feel that, depending on the financial kind of future for SWAN and the membership, if we need to maintain higher levels of reserves, we certainly can do that. But I'll just point out that we have not been levying libraries in membership fees to build these reserves up. We do charge a one-time joining fee for libraries, and that is a reserves contribution. So you see that in FY21 that the 3 libraries that joined, they were assessed a one-time fee, and that is reflected there roughly around 26,000. So if we were to have additional libraries join, there would be a reserves contribution. And that's another area that if it was felt that we need to be charging more for a reserves contribution from new libraries, we certainly could. But that's the reserves picture. And let's move on to the next slide here. And just membership fees, just overall, there's just a recap. We do have separate formulas for academic schools, special and public libraries. Those are detailed in the packet as far as what those look like. The most detail that's provided, taking up the most space as far as within your packet in the fee section, is for public libraries. This formula is based on tax data from 4 counties. And then that tax data also is lined up with bond payments. So I did hear from a number of directors about debt service obligations that maybe had changed or weren't noted prior. So I've updated the charts for that. But you can read far more details on this than I think is appropriate for today if you go to the SWAN support site and look under the About/Budget section. The fee chart for the public libraries does show that the Rails LSAP is applied as reduction to membership fees. So I like to always, have directors be aware of that. You do see your fee total with the reduction, but you also see the fee total if there were, for whatever reason, no state funding whatsoever provided to SWAN. So you always have a pretty good idea of what maybe you would call the worst case scenario as far as your membership fees. And I do know some directors budget with that number in your own budgets. So that, I think, brings my presentation to a close on budget. The electronic ballot system is out. I did hear from at least 2 directors about not receiving the email to vote in the budget. That is not a problem. We can make sure to get you the correct logins. In fact, the one library director that I worked with, we used this independent ballot system where you click on that support button and then you will open up basically a ticket with the vendor that we're using. So while codes have been sent out to everyone, for some reason or another, it's possible that you may not have gotten that email. And we can assist you with that. This ballot will close on the 12th. Any questions on budget or this process at this point? I'm not seeing any activity in the chat. This is another place to ask questions if you don't feel like unmuting yourself. Ted, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Aaron. I just wanted to take a minute and talk about the board elections, which are happening. This year in 2021, we'll have 2 positions on the SWAN board that are up for election. Julie Millibeck from Downers Grove. Whoops, little feedback. Julie Millibeck from Downers Grove and Stacy Whitman from Eisenhower have reached their term limits. So we will definitely have 2 open seats this year. I would strongly encourage anyone who's interested in serving in a leadership role within the consortium to self-nominate. This is a great opportunity to contribute to the success of SWAN. It's also a really good professional development opportunity. So the timetable for nominations and elections starts on April 5th, when SWAN nominations will begin to be when self-nominations will begin to be accepted. Those self-nominations run from the 5th through the 30th, and you'll do that online. Next, we will release the candidate names on May 3rd. There'll be an electronic ballot between May 10th and May 31st, and then we'll announce the results on June 1st. So at the June 18th meeting, we invite the newly elected candidates to attend as guests. Their terms will officially begin on July 1st, and their first board meeting will be on July 23rd. So if you're new to SWAN, the board is comprised of 7 directors and administrators elected at large from libraries within SWAN, and we hold our meetings on typically the 3rd Friday of each month at 9:30 in the morning. Those meetings have been virtual for quite some time. When they are no longer virtual, they would be held at the Westmont office of SWAN. If you have any questions about the process or what the board does, please reach out to me or to any of the board members. We're happy to let you know what you could expect as a board member, or what our experience has been like. Again, I strongly encourage anyone who has any interest to self-nominate. And if you have any additional questions, there's more information on the SWAN support site about what the board does and what our role is. I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions right now? Feel free to email me or any of the other members of the board if so. And I'll pass it back to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Ted. I'll also make a plug that there's a Rails board election. I'm aware of at least 1 seat held by a director, and that's Paul Mills on the Rails board. I believe won't be running for that spot. So I think it would also be great to have maybe a SWAN director consider maybe running for that spot. Having representation on the Rails board would be, I would say, be very helpful for SWAN and for just our area. So let's move on from here to the next slide. All right, I'm going to ask Tara Wood if you're here. Say hello. Okay, there you go. So Tara, take it from here. I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself, but let's have you introduce yourself and talk about this Aspen project.
Sure, I am Tara Wood. I'm the SWAN User Experience Manager, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our Aspen Discovery Project. You want to go to the next slide? So first, I thought I would highlight a couple of SWAN requests that have been made live in Aspen. Since we kicked off this project, which I had to check our calendars, it was May 15th, 2020, when we first started talking to Bywater, which is the group that we're working with for Aspen development. We've had about 90 features and fixes go into Aspen so far, and Separately from that, there have been about 30 Symphony integration updates that have also gone into Aspen. We're not the first Symphony library, but we are the second in the first consortia. So we've seen a lot of enhancements to Aspen that have come as a direct result of our work with Bywater, which is very exciting. So I thought I would just highlight three of those highlights highlight three of those requests that have gone into place since our pilot kicked off. So the first is better record grouping for movies and TV series, new combo pack and Kindle formats, and expanded video game formats. And in the next slides, I'll show you what those look like. So first, this was a big priority for our pilots. We're seeing that Aspen had a little trouble grouping movie remakes that had the same name. So previously you might see something like True Grit that has has two editions, one from the 2000s and another, the John Wayne version, the date I have forgotten. Those would kind of group together, and patrons might run the risk if they placed a hold on a DVD that they might not get the version that they wanted. So working with Bywater, SWAN was able to implement some changes to use the uniform title to help separate those out. And we also implemented some changes with the subfield P and subfield N, which I put all the credit to Scott and our cataloging leads in our pilots for identifying some of those opportunities for cataloging improvements there, or improvements around how Aspen handles the catalog data. They also were able to refine some of the TV series that were getting grouped together, kind of multiple seasons. So that is looking a lot better, and we're really excited about that, and that will benefit any library that's using Aspen. We can go to the next slide. We also worked with Bywater to add some expanded video game formats. Again, that was a big request from our pilot libraries. So those include, separating out like Nintendo Switch versus Wii and Wii U and all the many different PlayStations. So that will make it a lot easier for patrons to make sure they're getting a game that matches their particular system and to be able to filter on those formats. You want to look at the next slide? I thought I'd also highlight some new formats. We added a Blu-ray DVD combo pack format. Again, another request from our pilots. And then we also added a Kindle format that previously didn't exist. They would just get grouped under ebook, and it was really hard to pull out those filter or find those Kindle items without kind of clicking into an ebook and thinking like, oh, is it for Kindle? And that's something we identified in usability testing fairly early on. And also we know from our data of enterprise use that most patrons using the catalog to access ebooks are getting those Kindle formats. That is overwhelmingly the most popular format from the catalog specifically. So we can go to the next slide. I also thought I'd point out some new overdrive features that are in Aspen now. Improving overdrive was a big focus of the previous Aspen release. And we didn't actually make these requests, but I thought it would be helpful to show just how the ongoing work also benefits us. So there's now Overdrive Magazine's integration, which I know many of you are excited about. Since a couple of our consortia, I believe two of the Overdrive consortia have purchased Overdrive magazines. There's also previews now of Overdrive items and better handling of consortia integration, which we didn't necessarily request that, but it sort of just came out of setting up our very complicated Overdrive setup. If you want to go to the next slide, Dawn, I'll just show you quickly here you can see The Economist. That is an example of an Overdrive magazine that is now in Enterprise and in Aspen and available for any of our pilot libraries. And there you can also see if someone hits that preview from the issue button, it will pop up with a preview of the magazine. And that's also true for any Overdrive ebooks and audiobooks as well. So patrons can kind of verify that's what they want before they check out. So here I wanted to highlight both a plus and a challenge of Aspen. So the number of releases between March 2020 and March 2021 for Aspen versus Enterprise. Aspen had 20 releases and Enterprise had 1. So what that means is about twice a month, we're seeing changes going into Aspen, and it's a very different environment than when we've been on Enterprise and we're upgrading maybe once or twice during the year, and we sort of have full control to decide even if we want to upgrade. We could stay on an older version, and that's not really an option with Aspen. Those releases roll out very frequently, so that's exciting. That's how we've been able to get 90 requests into Aspen in this short period of time. But that also means that that interface is constantly changing, and that could be a challenge for some of your staff getting used to these kind of constant enhancements going into place. It is more in line with other technology services that you're used to using, like Google or Gmail, but definitely a very different environment than we're used to with Enterprise. We also conducted 3 rounds of usability testing in this past month, and I thought I'd just highlight some of the comments that we got in our most recent tests to get a sense of how patrons are reacting to Aspen. So one participant said it has all the formats. What makes it very clear is which format it is. I can get it on Kindle, I can get it on Overdrive, I can get it on Access. I like a lot of audiobooks, so I like this format. It makes it very clear. This particular person liked to listen to audiobooks while they knit, and they were an extremely avid library user. And we were specifically targeting power users for these tests because the power users can be the hardest to get buy-in when there's a big change, and that a big change to the catalog will also likely have the most impact on them. So we wanted to hear from those users. Another participant noted they saw this while you wait feature. It's a couple of recommendations will pop up when you place a hold of things that are on shelf that you could also place a hold on. And that participant really liked that feature, saying, you know, it makes it easy for kid picture books. It's hard, you don't know what you're looking for, so they really like getting some ideas for other kids' books on a topic. And then one participant also noted it seems to be less clicks to get what you want. Go to the next slide here. So right now in the Aspen pilot, we are in beta as of yesterday morning. We have put the links up to the Aspen catalogs on the pilot library's enterprise instances. So patrons are now checking out Aspen. We've got a couple of research activities we're running. We're continuing to analyze our usability testing findings. Since we did 3 rounds, each just a week apart, we have a lot of analysis to do. So we will post those reports when they are available. We're also now collecting usage stats from patrons, so we will be able to start analyzing those statistics and making some decisions based on those. For example, looking at the facets in the catalog that are most used, and maybe facets that are less frequently used, we might be able to move into an advanced search. And we're also posting surveys. We'll be posting our first survey for patrons later today or tomorrow, and starting to get some survey feedback from patrons. In addition, we've already got a very robust feature backlog, lots of requests that our pilots have identified, and so those will feed our development priorities honestly, we probably have enough that that will keep us busy for at least a solid year or more. So we want to also prioritize those with our pilots and kind of get to a place where we can agree on these are the development priorities that we have before we can make Aspen our primary catalog. So kind of identifying those features we want to make sure are in place before you'd, for example, swap out your search box on your website to go to Aspen instead of Enterprise. And that is all I have on Aspen. Oh, I should say you can find more at support.swanlibraries.net/Aspen.
Thanks, Tara. This is Aaron again. I just thought I'd maybe ask if there's any the directors that are at libraries that are involved in the pilot. I know it's only been a day, but feel free to share anything right now. Just initial feedback or what you're looking forward to.
Well, this is Julie from Downers Grove. We were involved in the usability testing, and we did get really solid patron feedback. So far, it's only been a day. We've only gotten staff feedback since the beta launch, but staff are really excited about this. So we're really hoping that this is the answer to the catalog problems we've had for so long.
Thank you. Any others here involved in the pilot that would like to share anything with your colleagues? Well, thank you, Julie. Yes, as far as Aspen goes, it's been, I think it's a great example of being able to kind of keep a project moving forward while we're juggling everything else as you all are within this pandemic. So keeping steady progress on this. We have not really had to really delay it. In fact, we've learned as much as you all, within this, how to navigate a lot of parts of this project online. Our usability testing with library patrons online has been pretty successful. In fact, there's, I think, some indication that doing it online with patrons is maybe a better way to approach this moving forward. At least those are some of the discussions that Tara and I have had. But thanks again, Tara, for this update and overview. I think it's worth noting, if you're really wanting to get a full feature overview, that support site URL does have links to all the pilot libraries catalogs and videos showing how Aspen works at this time. But as Tara noted, 20 releases over a 12-month period is a lot. So we're just going to also have to just get used to the fact that, the catalog has moved. This catalog potential for SWAN is going to be showing that we can incorporate new changes fairly quickly, but it just means we're going to be having to kind of roll with it, as opposed to the, other model where releases come less frequently, but the system more or less is sort of like configured and kind of stayed for good long stretches. All right, let's move on, Dawn. Library use policy. So this policy is in your meeting packet if you want to read it in full. This came about through some recommendations from Stephen Schluert, the SWAN IT and System Support Manager. Stephen's going to provide an overview of this. This is a new policy that was passed by the SWAN board at their last meeting, but we felt like it was important to note all the member libraries about what this policy means and sort of the good things that it means for us, and that SWAN is moving to a more and more web-based systems, but that does come with some challenges, and we want to make you aware of that. So take it away, Stephen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. As you're likely familiar, a foundational component of SWAN's services is always the security and privacy of patron data. So with that in mind, as SWAN has expanded across platforms that are now accessible over cloud services and accessible anywhere in the world, this policy is intended to clarify the responsibilities of member libraries and their staff when accessing and maintaining patron data. The policy specifies several agreements, including things along the lines of how passwords and credentials to SWAN systems should be handled, requiring the use of strong passwords and refraining from sharing passwords for applicable logins. It talks about the type of patron data that should be stored and the things that we don't allow in the SWAN database. And it serves to prevent surprises in the form of unwanted access, which really can come from a number of sources, including trusted third-party vendors at times, or even former library staff. So the policy should be reviewed and maintained by all of your library staff and directors on a regular basis, and it serves to continue, or as our services continue to expand, we'll likely make additions to this policy and incorporate it as a reminder in certain SWAN applications. So you might see it maybe as a splash screen later on, so you'll actually just kind of have that reminder and just have a refresher of it each time. So that's the SWAN library use policy. You can find it linked on our support site. It's currently part of the collection of policies, and I'd recommend everyone go out and take a look at it right as soon as you can.
Thanks, Stephen. Ted, we're getting to the end of this agenda. I thought we'd maybe use this time to talk a little bit about just some things that maybe have just come up in the last few days. And I'll ask Dawn Tortorella to jump in here. We have heard from at least one director. I'm not sure about any tickets that have come in yet, but the Dr. Seuss books seems to be something that a lot of library directors are at least expressing a little concern in the directors list that Rails hosts. And I think that there's just maybe concern that these books that are going out on interlibrary loan, while there's a great deal of interest in them, there's also maybe potential some theft that is also a level of concern. So Ted or Dawn, I don't know if you want to jump in here. We're looking at putting together some recommendations that we'll send out to libraries, but just want to acknowledge that that is something that is been raised.
One thing we hope to have by the end of today is just a list for all of you so that you know where your items are in transit, and maybe just kind of a pause in if you receive those in transit, kind of hold them on the side until we give the owning library a chance to decide what they want to do with those. We know that a lot of these items are now floating throughout the system. If they're in your own library, obviously, if you can get your hands on your own collection, you can decide what you want to do with those. But our concern is just, getting those items in transit back to you so you can make those decisions. So just wanted to let you know we're aware of that, and we'll try and provide some tools for you by the end of the day.
That sounds great, Dawn. Thanks. Does anybody else have any comments or questions about that? Oh, this is Ted, sorry. All right, does anybody else have any other announcements? Anything they'd like to share with the group? Okay, y'all are not a talkative bunch today. Does anybody have any questions for the board or for Aaron or any of our SWAN staff? Okay, Aaron, do you have anything else?
No, that covers it.
All right, it's 10:41. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Be well.